Hello, strong, beautiful, confident woman of God. Yes, I am talking to you. Welcome to the Purpose After Domestic Violence podcast, where getting freedom from the effects of domestic violence meets empowerment to walk in the fullness of your God-designed purpose. I am your host, Tina. I am an attorney, an author and speaker, and a Christian life purpose coach. I will be your guide here, helping you on your journey from overcoming victimhood and just simply surviving to stepping into the victorious life God has waiting just for you. As we travel this road together, Purpose After Domestic Violence is not just a podcast. It's a sacred space where the shackles of domestic violence are broken and empowerment takes root, grows, and flourishes. Here, we are not just surviving, we're thriving in the fullness of our God-designed purpose. I have personally walked the path from victimhood to victory, and I'm here to guide you through it. Picture me as your big sister, holding your hand, sharing wisdom and revelation, and helping you navigate the twists and turns of this path towards healing, freedom, and empowerment. Whether you're on the path to victory or seeking a guiding light in the storm, Purpose After Domestic Violence is here for you. Together, we'll illuminate the path forward to a life filled with purpose. Welcome, my sweet sister, to the Purpose After Domestic Violence podcast. Okay, we are back today. Today's topic is psychological abuse. I'm here with the lovely Rebecca. Becca, we call her. Yep, so we are so excited. So this will be published long after Becca has her baby. But today, as of recording, this may or may not, we may have one more week to record a couple episodes, but probably the next time you hear from us, Becca will be a mother of 3 lovely young human beings. So we're excited about that. Okay, we're going to jump in. This lesson today really ties in a lot to last week's topic, right? Emotional abuse. We've got our same tactics, both delivered through verbal abuse, right?
Yep.
But this one is pretty serious. And I'm going to take us deep into a couple of topics that really aren't talked about too terribly much anymore. So I'm going to start off with the devotional from this 100 Days to Brave. I thought this one was pretty cool too and ties in a little bit to what we're talking about. So this is What's an Open Door? Okay. And this is Psalm 23:3. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And the author writes, how do you know when to make a brave move, even if it isn't easy? How do you, hold on. What God gave me to share today, this is definitely appropriate. Okay. How do you know when to make a brave move, even if it isn't easy? How do you know when to just go for it? So the author writes, as a sophomore in college and for most of my college career, I loved spending time in the offices of my campus ministry, the University of Georgia Wesley Foundation. It felt cool and trendy and Christian. A campus ministry is a church for college students set on a college campus. Many of my youth group friends also attended UGA, so every time I stopped by the Wesley building, felt like a homecoming of sorts. And when I walked through the halls, I saw the photos of mission trips from past years. One day, I stood in front of one of those pictures, a group of college students clumped together in a sunflower field. The sun was shining on their heads, almost making the curly blonde girl look like she was glowing. Across the bottom, it read, Scotland. I had heard of Scotland. That was about it. During a Wednesday night service at Wesley that fall, just weeks later, really, the mission trips were announced for that school year, and I saw Scotland as an option. Yeah, I thought, I want to stand in that field and take that sunflower picture. It wasn't super spiritual. It was an open door. I knew the Bible said to go into all the nations and share the gospel, Matthew 28:19. So it was more about picking from the list of trips that would be offered for the interested students that semester. I prayed. I remember that. But there was no huge Scotland banner flying outside my bedroom window or any other weird signal from the heavens on this one. I just knew I wanted to go on a mission trip, and that was the one that stood out to me. I ended up going on that mission trip and even wound up living there for a time. Going on a trip overseas and later to live there took courage. It was different. It was new, and I wasn't following a path lit with bright arrows. It was an open door that God led me through. In today's passage, the psalmist said that God led him down the path of righteousness. Ask the Lord to lead you to the open doors, then be brave enough to walk through them. I love that. And I want to just give a plug, a shameless plug, right, for our Power After DV program. Because ladies, this is an open door.
Yeah.
This is an open door for you. And we're waiting inside this open door, on the other side of this open door, to help you get freedom from the effects of domestic violence.
Yes.
So what are you waiting for?
Run on through.
Run on through. We're here to give you a big hug and welcome you into what we're doing. Because this isn't just what we're doing. It's what God is doing.
Yes.
He, number one, we talked about last week, does not want his daughters being abused, right? No. But number two, he wants deep, intimate relationship with us. He wants us walking in our purpose. He wants us to be living not from a place of a broken heart, or as we'll talk about today, a broken mind.
Yes.
But he wants us to be walking in the place of the woman that he created us to be.
Come on.
And I think one thing that we need to realize is before the foundations of the world, he had us in mind, right?
Yeah.
He already has our story written. He knows the woman that he created us to be.
Yes.
And the biggest thing that prevented us from actually being that woman is the years and years of abuse that we've endured.
Yeah. That is so true.
So if we can unravel all that and heal from it and do our 4-step framework to freedom, right? Step 1 in this program, repentance and forgiveness, we are well on our way to stepping into being the woman that God created us to be.
Yes.
And he sees us that way. Now we just need to come into and we just need to come into alignment with what he sees when he looks at us.
So true.
Ooh.
And it's not as hard as you think. Like we said, things like that. God's not that complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. And today stands as that open door. If you've been listening to our podcast all these months and you haven't taken that step through that door, we are like bells and whistles over this door frame today, okay?
Yes.
All right, so I want to dive into psychological abuse. Again, just quick recap, same exact tactics as we talked about last week for physical abuse. The target of the enemy is different though. With emotional abuse, the target of the enemy is our heart and the way we feel. And with psychological abuse, the target of the enemy is our mind and how we think. And when we think of psychological abuse, and I talk about this in the book, that a lot of women, well, first of all, 95% of men who physically abuse their partners are also psychologically abusing them. Yes. So we've talked a lot about, we can identify physical and sexual abuse pretty easily, but we don't recognize the other things. So if you have ever been in a physically abusive relationship, I promise you, you have also been in a psychologically abusive relationship.
Yeah. They usually go hand in hand.
They go hand in hand. And psychological abuse is responsible, even if you're not being physically abused, for post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, I put the statistic in my book. I think it's like 70% of psychologically, sorry, can't say the word, psychologically abused women have PTSD.
Yeah.
That's a huge number.
It does a lot of damage.
So much damage. So when I think of PTSD, I think about two things.
Mm-hmm.
I think about Vietnam War veterans. And it's war veterans across the board. It's just for me, I wasn't in my parents. So my father was Vietnam War. So that was close to home. That hit close to home, right? So, and when I first left my husband, I lived in an apartment, and my next door neighbor was a Vietnam War veteran. And I figured that out because, I mean, he displayed really pretty severe symptoms of post-traumatic stress syndrome. He would be outside and the boys were little at the time, so we'd be outside, and I had 3 boys, right? They're bound to make a sudden noise every now and then, right? So every time we were outside and my neighbor was outside too, and one of my boys shouted or did something, he would jump, or if a car was going down the street and backfired or something, I mean, he would like hit the ground, I mean, I could tell. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, right? But I could tell. So I asked him one day, I said, "Did you serve in Vietnam?" And he said, "Yes." So so in my mind, that's what I think of. I think of a Vietnam War vet. So when we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder, when you're trying to navigate an abusive marriage, and if you're raising kids, and next week we'll talk about financial abuse, right?
Yeah.
And you feel trapped in that relationship, you're literally living in a war zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
We think, serving in Vietnam or whatever war it was, and you have PTSD, that was some huge major life event. It's no different when you're living in an abusive marriage. You are living in a war zone, and not only that, but so are your children.
Come on. A lot of people, I think, don't think, other than the ones that are in it.
Yeah.
A lot of times they don't think about the effect it has on the children.
Yeah.
Psychologically as well.
It's so damaging.
The kids are directly being abused or not, or they're just seeing mom being abused.
Yeah.
Still abuse.
Yeah.
It still affects them in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's scary. And this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
So there's something else I think about when I think of post-traumatic stress syndrome. And again, I think this goes to my generation. Not that this happened to me in my generation, but I don't know. You'll have to tell me if this is something that pops to mind. But concentration camps.
It doesn't pop into my mind, but I could understand why.
Right.
Yours. Yeah. Yeah. When I think about it, it makes sense.
Yeah. So concentration camp survivors, huge PTSD problems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, my grandparents had friends that were concentration camp survivors. So they had the numbers tattooed on their arms. I mean, legit concentration camp survivors. Cy and Lutzy were their names. I'll never forget them. It made such a huge impact. I was just a little girl at the time, but meeting them and hearing their stories made a huge impact on my life.
Well, I bet.
Yeah. And so, same thing. You know, a second ago, we, used the analogy of living in an abusive marriage is like living in a war zone. It's also like living in a concentration camp.
Yeah,
And you never know when you're going to get hauled off to that gas chamber.
that's true. And that hits home.
Yeah.
See, my mind always goes to children,
Hmm.
but I've worked with kids when before I was a full-time mom and had all these
Yeah.
babies. I originally was going into nursing and I wanted to go into pediatrics, but even before then, as a CNA, and I also worked at the Live White Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
And then my parents were foster parents and adopted kids as well when I was a child. So my whole life have grew up with scenarios with siblings seeing PTSD in children.
Yeah.
And then same thing when I worked the Boys and Girls Club, and then with the elderly too. I took care of veterans,
Yeah.
but that's where my mind always goes to, I think, is I remember when my brother was 8 years old and we lived in the country, and the first weekend he stayed with us, him hearing frogs outside and crying and having a breakdown because it triggered him. Just the frogs.
Yeah.
Thought people were outside screaming.
Yeah.
So like
Wow.
my mind always goes to children because
Yeah.
I
And that,
experienced
yeah.
that firsthand too
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
children having PTSD.
Yeah. And that's a great point because when we think of the Vietnam vet, right? I mean, we're talking about grown men,
Yeah.
you know, and when we're talking about an abusive marriage, we tend to look at ourselves. Well, it makes sense I have PTSD because I was living in a war zone, but I had three little boys and so were they,
Yeah.
and little boys and little girls, you have a little girl, right? They don't go off to war at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years of age,
No.
but they are suffering as if they had.
Yeah. You see the effect on them when they're little. You
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
It can be frustrating too when you're dealing with something like that too, like, and you take them somewhere and if something does trigger them,
Yeah.
because it happens, and people are like, well, what's going on? Is he just shy or she's shy? Is
Right.
this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Are they on the spectrum?
Right. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Right.
No, they're not on the spectrum, but they are highly aware of, certain
Yeah.
profiles
Yeah.
because this is what they've experienced.
Right. Or ADHD. Let's put them on Ritalin. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We need to dig deeper. We need to dig deeper. Yep. And don't just throw drugs at our kids. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know
But
my parents had to put their foot down. My brother, that's
yeah.
what they in the foster system at 8 years old. I remember him falling
Right.
asleep at the table during dinner, taking a
Yeah.
bite. They had him so doped up on drugs when he
Hmm.
first lived with us because he had ADHD
Right.
and
Right.
PTSD.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Okay. And I so
Yeah.
appreciate that you do like think about when we're talking about these, you go straight to what's the effect on the kids, right? I, I feel like for me, that's not my focus. So maybe this is another thing we'll come to find out that why God put us together, right?
Yeah.
But I think about what I had to go through and I want to help women. And my perspective is if I can help the women get out of these abusive marriages and heal from the effects of domestic violence, then I'm also impacting the kids too.
Yeah. And you are.
Yeah. I don't look at how can I heal the kids, right? I look at how I can heal mom so that she can heal her own children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it works. Because if you
Yeah.
get mom start healing and
Yeah.
open mom's eyes to what's going on with herself, then
Yeah.
her eyes open up to what's going on with the kids.
Yeah.
At least that's how it felt. I mean, for
Yeah.
me right away,
Yeah.
Mama Bear took over, and I was like, okay.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So with the concentration camp um, thing and with our mission trip to Scotland, I feel like this ties in. So every now and then I like to like pick a famous historical Christian person, right? And read about them and find out, their story and what they did. So when we think of concentration camps in that light, does anybody come to mind for you?
When I'm thinking of concentration camps,
Yeah.
Anne Frank, I think a
Well,
lot.
yeah, yes, but
The
Corey Ten
pianist. I
Corey
only
Ten
know what I
Boom.
learned in school.
Right, right, right. Corey Ten Boom. Are they even teaching about
Not now.
that? See the Holocaust and see that's a tragedy right there.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
tragic.
They did a little bit when I was in school, but it was really, we just kind of, I remember watching The Boy in Striped Pajamas, The Pianist, and we learned about Anne Frank. And other than that, they kind of
Yeah,
hands off.
yeah, yeah. So okay, so have you heard of Corey Ten Boom?
No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well look her up. Okay, so before I did my deep dive study on her life, I assumed she was Jewish because I did know that she was in the concentration camps and she was a concentration camp survivor
Okay.
and she was very instrumental in her faith was a huge thing. And why I didn't make the connection, I don't know, because I knew she was a Christian, right? But I'm
Okay.
like, why would she be in a concentration camp? That was for Jews, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so in my deep dive, she was not Jewish. She was not in a concentration camp because she was Jewish. She was Christian. She had a very strong faith. Her and her family, they were Dutch.
Okay.
Okay. And her father was a very, very famous watchmaker, like one of the best in the world in his generation as far as watch repair and watches. Okay. So her and her family, she was younger. I think late teens, early 20s during the Holocaust. And so her father, I could be wrong on that. I may be wrong on that. She might have been older. I think she was. Okay, but her father, his business was in a building, okay? And they lived in the building. They had the shop downstairs. They lived upstairs, okay? So his father, or her father, became instrumental in hiding Jews
Oh no.
and helping the Jews get like ration food cards and stuff. So this ultimately eventually came to light and they got arrested and sent off to the concentration camps with the Jews.
For
Okay.
help people.
Yes. Yes. So neat story. Neat story. And I feel like she was sent on a mission trip into the concentration camps.
It's wild.
How do you how many times did Paul get sent to jail? He wasn't a criminal, right? God was putting him
Good point.
in the
That's a
prisons,
good point.
right? To set the captives free, literally and figuratively.
The first prison ministry right there.
Yes. Yes. Mm. So we just never know. We just never know what the open door is going to lead to, right? And
Yes.
who God is calling us to minister to. See, because that is the thing, part of our purpose, right, is to be ministering to other people, to be taking, she said it in here, right?
Yeah.
Matthew 28:19. I knew the Bible said to go into all the nations and share the gospel. I mean, it's part of our mandate.
It is. It's part of your purpose.
Yeah, it's part of your purpose. And when we have a broken heart and we have a broken mind. We can't think straight.
You can't do that.
You can't. So we've got to get healed. We've got to get healed.
And I think that's one of the, especially with your heart and your mind is, it's something God works in mysterious ways, but you let
Yeah.
him work on you.
Yeah.
And some things will be like this,
Yeah.
but then some stuff, it's a process
Yeah.
and that's okay. And I think recognizing that that's okay and just keep building that with God and
Yeah.
having time and letting him, mend you back together. Let him mend your mind back together.
Right. Right.
That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And if you let him and you're willing, he will.
He will. Absolutely. Because we know he's willing.
And then you can get back into the family business and get what you're supposed to be doing.
Yes. The family business. I love it. Family
That
business.
stuck with me, the family
Yeah.
business.
Yep. Yeah. Mm. So good. And so we mentioned Paul got sent into the prisons and Corey Ten Boom got sent into the concentration camps. God doesn't promise that it's going to be easy.
No,
And he
no.
may very well send us to some very dark places. But
Yeah.
the cool thing about Corey Ten Boom is she knew who her God was, and she did not grow up in abusive family. Her father was very loving and supportive. She worked with her father in the business.
That's wild. I'm gonna have to research now. I gotta know.
Yeah. And um, you know, when she was young and all the way through, she worked side by side with him. And that just wasn't done back in the day, right?
Yeah.
So she was an expert watchmaker and repairer in her own right, and they grew up in the word and they grew up going to church. So she had a very strong foundation. So God was able to use her by sending her to the concentration camp. Many Jews came to the Lord because of her there. She was able to encourage and minister to the women that she was with.
Well, and I think that's something to recognize as you're talking.
Yeah,
We don't deserve to be abused. Women do not in
right,
these in our marriages, whatever rather childhood, whatever you've been through, you didn't deserve it. And it
right,
wasn't part of God's plan.
right,
It was someone else using their free will. You know what I
right,
mean?
right, right.
But he can use and take anything, a terrible, terrible, horrible thing
Yep,
and flip it,
yep,
use it for good.
yep. For those who are called according to their purpose.
Yes. So it's not like God was like, oh, yes, I'm going to, you know, make this terrible thing happen.
Right.
No, but free will's there. But
Yep.
and his heart was breaking while you're in it. It's like, I
Yeah.
bet he didn't want her to go to the concentration camps necessarily.
Right. Right.
God didn't necessarily just stick her in there,
Right.
but it happened and he used that
Yes. Good. Yep.
as a purpose, a ministry for her to save
Yes. Yes.
and bring more people in that terrible situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing with Paul.
Yeah.
Same thing with this situation. You can relate to people. We've both been,
Yep.
through domestic violence. You
Yep.
can reach some people and different women that I can't.
Right.
Just like vice versa.
Right.
Anyone listening.
Yeah. Mm.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So I'll say it one more time. Here's an open door for you, ladies. Walk through and let us partner with you and partner with God to
Yes.
flip those horrible moments in your life around for good,
Yes.
for good. Because there are so many women, maybe even men and children out there that need to hear your story.
Yeah. Oof. I just got goosebumps.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something, God's really been speaking to me the last few years. And especially in 2020 when we were in lockdown and God gave me this framework. Um, and I hadn't created, the course yet, but I felt like I was already years behind, right? And
Yeah.
God was really speaking to me like, Tina, there are women out there waiting for you to do this. You need to get moving on it,
Mm.
right? So the longer you sit and don't walk through this door or another door that God might be opening to you, the longer other people out there who need to hear your story aren't getting the deliverance and the hope and the healing that they need.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important perspective to see, so stop coming from a place of broken identity and broken heart and broken mind and realize that you are a daughter of the Most High King. Start asking him to show you how he sees you
Mm.
and start asking him to heal you. And we hope that you will utilize these podcasts and my book and workbook. Um, we do have, you know, a coaching program that you can actually come into and be with us, right? Get face-to-face access with us so we can help you through this so that you can get freedom and start walking out and
And your
walking,
purpose.
yeah, in your purpose and from a place of the woman that God created you to be.
Yes. Because
Yeah,
he didn't like what happened. But
right.
he has a purpose and a plan for you.
Yes,
Turn that terrible, awful part of your life into
yes,
something beautiful.
yes,
To bring glory to him
yes,
and to add on to the kingdom.
yes. So good.
I got goosebumps. I got
It's
goosebumps.
exciting. It's exciting. It's
God is
exciting.
so good.
He is. He is. All right. Well, thank you for being with us today. Next week, we are going to talk about financial abuse, which is actually the number one reason why women stay in abusive relationships.
Yep.
So we will talk about that next time. Thank you so much for joining me on my Purpose After Domestic Violence podcast. I hope today's conversation resonated with you. And if you think it could encourage someone you know, please share it. Together we can spread the light of healing and purpose. I would so appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, and leave me a review. These small actions would bless me indeed and help other women find this podcast and be encouraged too. Remember, you are not alone. Your strength is undeniable, and your journey is worth celebrating. If you have questions, thoughts, or topics you'd like me to explore in the future, please reach out on social media or you can visit my website at purposeafterdv.com. Before we part ways, always remember, you are a strong, beautiful, confident woman of God, and your purpose is shining brightly within you. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep moving forward on your journey to a life filled with purpose.